Happy to have Dan Pickering here interviewing Tom Jorden of Coterra Energy. I'll introduce Dan and allow him to introduce Tom. Dan is one of the smartest thinkers on the energy space and energy investing. He was a founder of a company called Tudor Pickering Holt, which is a very successful investment banking firm, and is currently the founder and chief investment officer of Pickering Energy Partners. So with that, thank you very much, and please welcome Dan and Tom to the stage. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. As we get settled here, let me just say, I think this is the third FossilFueled, and I want to thank Adam for the foresight and the vision to do something like this. And I'll thank all of you for attending and for being part of what's a critically important industry for our country. So I think Adam's intent is for this to be a celebration, and there's certainly a lot to celebrate. So I'm pleased to be on the stage with Tom Jorden. Tom has a fairly straightforward bio. He's a geophysicist by degree from Colorado School of Mines. He started in the energy business with Superior and Union Pacific. He joined a predecessor of Coterra called Key. As chief geophysicist, he became head of exploration and was named president and CEO in 2011 of the predecessor company to Coterra, and this is the CEO of the Coterra that we know today, starting in 2021. So, Tom, it's great to have you here. We're going to spend 30 minutes talking about what's going on in the Permian and the oil patch. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, and I also want to thank Adam and the Innovex team and all of you for listening. So thank you.
That's right. So, Tom, if we think about the world today, it's different than it was a few months ago. But talk to us a little bit. First, tell us a little bit about Coterra so we understand where you're coming from. How big are you in the Permian, et cetera? And then maybe talk about what are the key variables that you're watching right now as you're trying to guide your business, forward over the next few years.
Well, thank you. So much has changed here in the last 110 days, or whoever's counting. I will start by saying that this is a celebration of our industry. And a few weeks ago, I had the honor and privilege to be one of a group of CEOs that met with the president. And I'll tell you how he started the meeting. He said that for what you do for our country, your energy, your industry, you're the foundation of everything else that makes this country possible. And he said, it's really a shame that you were locked out of this White House the last 4 years. You are welcome now, and we are deeply grateful for what you do. So it was nice to hear that. It was nice to have that kind of affirmation and that kind of support. But, Coterra, in answer to your question, is really built to last through the cycles. We learned long ago that we can't predict the price of natural gas, nor can we predict the price of oil. So we wanted to build a company that had a balanced revenue stream of low-cost oil and low-cost natural gas. So Coterra, we produce a little over 150,000 barrels a day in the Permian, give or take. We produce about a BCF of gas a day in the Permian. We have strong assets in the Anadarko Basin and also Northeast Pennsylvania and the Marcellus Shale. So diversified revenue stream helps us ride through the cycles.
And we're having a cycle, or are we not having a cycle? When we think about the near term and what's going on, oil price has gone 72 to 62. Is the next $10 move up or down, and why?
Well, I would take the under on that, even though that may not be a very popular thing in this room. The truth of the matter is the world is oversupplied with oil. And although I think many of us are free market people at heart and really think free markets, as I do, will triumph in the end, all of us free market proponents tend to kind of quietly hope for a behavior out of a cartel in the Middle East. And that cartel is withholding supply. And so if OPEC were to truly reduce their curtailments and increase their production, that would drive the price of oil down. There's a lot of moving parts out there, and I'm hardly the best analyst to this, but given the turmoil in the Middle East we've seen in the last 18 months and Iran's role in it, it's just very hard for me to believe that the OPEC curtailments weren't somehow either driven or encouraged out of the White House as a grand bargain to normalize the Israeli-Saudi relationship and form a coalition against Iran. And so that makes me deeply concerned. The president wants low oil prices. He thinks that's his strongest counterweight to other things he's doing in the economy. And so, you know, we're looking for lower oil prices. I hope I'm wrong, but that's kind of what we expect.
What are the implications of that, Tom? Are you changing your behavior? Do you adjust drilling programs and spending? Do you drill through it? What's the plan if we have lower oil prices?
Well, we have the opportunity to pivot to natural gas. So we've got great natural gas assets we could pivot to. But, you know, there's probably no one answer in our industry. I think varying people have different asset quality and can stand $60 oil, $55 oil, or $50 oil differently, depending on your cost structure, your marketing arrangements, and your asset quality. You know, we still make a pretty good profit at prices as low as 50. You know, now we've all been spoiled. I mean, the returns in our business over the last, I would say, 8 years, really post 2016, our costs reset while our productivity went way up. You know, it used to be, I think many of you in this room probably, there was a point in your life where you thought you'd never see a well that made 1,000 barrels a day. And for many of us today, that's routine, you know, a well that might make 1,000 barrels a day. And so the returns that we're achieving in the Permian Basin in particular are great by historical standards. And so when we look at $50 oil, you know, I've looked at that recently, stared at it hard. It really are returns that in 2010, 2011, we thought were fantastic. So you know, it's all having to do with your perspective. I think every company at prices, sustained prices below 60, is probably going to look at their activity and make decisions on where they want to lay down some activity and just preserve those returns for a better day.
That implies I agree, maintain or hold that inventory in periods of low price, but the math only works on that if things get better reasonably quickly. You can't wait for 5 years. The NPV starts to deteriorate. So is implied in that a view that a downturn could be relatively short-lived?
Well, again, this is company by company, but I'll just, you know, you're asking me, I'll tell you the way I see it. We know they don't last forever. You know, if you look at, you know, the 2016 down cycle, downdraft lasted about 17 months. 2020 lasted about 9 months. So they don't last forever. But they also don't come pre-labeled with sticky notes telling you how long they're going to last. And so if you're managing an organization and you're managing a balance sheet, I think you have to assume it's going to last forever. You know, I would not drill through a downturn hoping to see land on the other side. You know, we're fairly conservative, and we've learned that the hard way. But I think the prudent move in a down cycle is to not make some assumptions about how long it's going to last, batten down the hatches, and be prepared for it to last for a long, long time.
Yeah. Talk about the things that you view as the most important dynamics in the Permian as we step out over the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, our workforce is the most important. I mean, you know, those of you in this room that do what you do, it's really deeply humbling to go out in the field, to ride around in trucks, to hear the stories of people, the innovation, the dedication, the commitment to our environment and safety. And I think many of our policymakers need to do that. Get out there and see who these people are and see what we do for a living. And, you know, the Permian is remarkable. It is far and away, I think, the most profitable basin in the country. It's been described to me aptly as a very forgiving basin because of its multi-pay nature. Heck, we entered the Permian in 2005 for natural gas. We started drilling in southeast New England for deep Morrow gas. And yeah, there was oil in the Permian, but it's 2005. Who cared about oil? And we found ourselves with an acreage position that was well positioned for the shale revolution when it moved to oil. As we look ahead in the Permian, I think one of the things, a prior panel, they talked, I think, really smartly about the role of natural gas in the Permian. With the amount of gas that the Permian produces, as we look through time, it's going to get gassier and gassier. Right now, most of us are drilling wells for which oil is the dominant revenue phase and maybe the sole revenue phase. It was said in the earlier panel that gas is a waste product. Heck, we model how low the gas price can go, and we would still be able to drill our oil well. And we have properties where we could pay $3 or $4 an M to have the gas taken away, and we'd still make a nice profit on the well.
Pay, not get paid.
Pay. Yes. And like negative Waha. But that can't last forever. As the basin matures and Tier 1 inventory gets depleted, natural gas revenue will become a stronger and stronger portion of that revenue stream, and possibly a gating item as to where the well gets drilled. So the country needs the 20 or 25 BCF a day that we're producing. And so if it's going to sustain out of the Permian, as the oil will naturally decline, the gas price is going to have to strengthen, because those wells will need to be drilled or the U.S. doesn't get that gas.
So there are two ways Permian gas price strengthens. One would be more in-basin consumption, which will lead us to a data center discussion, I guess. And the other would be export to markets, whether that's waterborne markets or Henry Hub or whatnot. Do you anticipate that we're going to have enough takeaway capacity on the midstream side to get to those positive price environments?
Well, that was also addressed nicely in the last panel. We never seem to have enough takeaway capacity because companies like Coterra are just really unwilling to commit to what it takes to get those pipelines built, because you're committing to future drilling capital in order to sustain those volumes. Therefore, you're committing to drill through future down cycles. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse game. But, there's going to need to be price support or it won't get built. We need the gas. And, of course, the data center is a big unknown at this point. It certainly makes a lot of sense for data centers to be built in basin and right on top of this gas supply and not have, the transport. It's a lot easier to lay fiber optic than it is to lay pipelines. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, depending on who you talk to, you hear about latency issues, that the distance between the data center and the consumer is not acceptable. But, I suspect we'll figure that out.
So, well, I'll come back to the over/under on are we gonna see data centers in the Permian? You and many other public companies have made commitments on call it ESG, on emissions specifically. How do you think? So the pendulum has swung from extreme focus, Dr. Curry's commentary, back to more pragmatism. How is that, or will it change how Coterra and others are going to attack the emissions issue in the Permian?
I can only speak for Coterra. No, it will not change how we address emissions, and it's a point of great concern to us because it is political. It's not just energy policy; it's energy politics, and right now there's only one team on the field. And that's rather concerning to me. I mean, I may agree. I think we have an all-star energy team. Secretary Burgum, Chris Wright, Minister Zeldin, they're fantastic. But there's half our country that doesn't agree with them. And there's only one team on the field. The Democrats are sidelined right now. And we need that debate because we need enduring policy. I was at a conference today in Oklahoma City where Secretary Wright and Minister Zeldin were there.
Ham Institute?
I'm sorry, yeah.
The Ham Institute.
Yeah. And so you kept hearing the word policy durability. Well, policy durability is a code word for both people at the table and argue it out. You're not going to have policy durability if only one side of the argument sets the policy. And then when the other side gets elected subsequently, it's going to get unwound. And so I'll tell you, at Coterra, we put a lot of energy into our emissions reduction, into our environmental program. And to dismantle that would be foolish, because I don't want to scare anybody, but President Ocasio-Cortez could make us really regret that. And so, and for us, it's about operational excellence. We years ago had a top-line engineering goal to reduce emissions, not reduce reporting, reduce emissions. If we found emissions that weren't reported, great. Spend the money it takes to reduce them. The reporting is a separate issue. And we found that we got better across the board in ways we didn't anticipate. Our safety standards got better, our spills decreased, our trucks got cleaner, our locations got cleaner. We re-engineered our facilities in ways we'd never anticipated and pioneered a new tankless design to eliminate the emitters. And it's about operational excellence. So we didn't do it because of Washington, and we won't undo it because of Washington.
I think that's a really important point. A lot of progress made. Hard to, probably don't want to go backwards for sure. You mentioned the government. I'll come back to it. Interesting commentary. The meeting with President Trump, he praises you, and then it feels like he's kind of kicking the industry in the teeth, whether it's drill, baby, drill, which would not have been good for our industry, or the grand bargain maybe that you mentioned with Saudis, et cetera. So what do you think, what is the government doing other than platitudes? What's it doing to help the industry right now? Or what do you think will happen that helps?
Well, I mean, there's tremendous progress happening right now. You may have seen the release last night. In fact, Secretary Burgum announced it at a reception I was unable to attend, that they're talking about 14 to 28-day turnaround for permits on BLM land. I mean, that's a radical change.
Drilling permits?
Drilling permits, yeah. If they really do that, that would change our ability to be flexible overnight. I mean, right now, in Texas, you can get a well drilled in fairly short order. We operate in Texas and New Mexico. In New Mexico, you have to do tremendous pre-planning, and then you're really hindered to make changes along the way. And of course, you all know that. A lot of you operate in New Mexico. They are really looking to facilitate infrastructure, and they're serious about it. The thing I'll praise this team about is they're not politicians. By and large, it's a cabinet full of people that were, like Chris Wright. Chris Wright needs this job like a hole in the head. I mean, he's doing it because he loves his country and he believes he can make a difference. Doug Burgum, really impressive guy. He could be doing, he could be doing so many other things, but he chose to do this because he thinks he can make a difference. These are not people. Jamie Dimon one time said, Jamie Dimon is, CEO of JP Morgan. I was in a meeting where he attended, and he said, the problem in Washington is that most of these people there, this is the best deal they've ever known. They've never had it so good. They're big shots, they go to the right parties, they get the best tables and restaurants, they get driven around. This is the best gig they've ever had. They don't want to give it up. And, whereas I look at the administration, if you agree or disagree with them, and these are successful people that for whom this is truly volunteer work, if you will. They've stepped out of very successful lives. And what's refreshing about them, and again, we can all agree or disagree on the specifics, but they look at things that don't make sense and they say, stop, we're not going to do that anymore. They're not tolerating the intolerable.
So are the things that they're doing going to help? Do you think we're going from 13 million barrels a day in the U.S. oil production to 15? So that's a political plus geology comment.
No, I don't. I think we're going to have greater infrastructure access, but for better or worse, I think the president likes low oil prices, and I think he will do what he can to encourage OPEC to keep prices low. Now, look, this is just me talking. I have no inside information on this, and I wouldn't take this to the bank. But one thing I'll say about President Trump, I think he says what he means and means what he says, and that's what he says.
Do you think so? The 13 going to 15 million barrels a day. Do you think if the price was okay, is the geology there to do it?
Yeah, I think we. I think we could probably add 1 million barrels. I don't know about 15, and we probably couldn't sustain that forever. But this industry is remarkably innovative. I mean, you heard that in the last panel. This industry has done so much more than I ever thought we'd do, and I think there's still plenty yet to be done that we don't anticipate.
Bring it back to the Permian. So, there's a lot of questions about how long can the inventory in the Permian hold out a ton of consolidation as the public companies tried to gather inventory. Give us your thoughts on the visibility of $70 a barrel good return drilling. A long time, a short time?
I would guess if price of oil were 70 or 75, we would see a basin decline probably in the early 2030s. But there's people that do better forecasting than I do. I can tell you that.
And so, which leads to a question. The world sort of views the Permian, or a lot of the U.S. world views the Permian as the marginal barrel. This is the place where, we've really added a lot of supply over time. Do you think the Permian's the world's marginal barrel? Because if that inventory starts to decline, then we need higher prices, and that's all going to kind of work out. Do you think the Permian's the marginal barrel over the next 5 years or 10?
My expectation is OPEC shifts back to be the swing producer globally.
Take a minute on water. That's a topic that comes up a lot. How do you think about water? Does it fit in the same category? Just how do you think about water?
Painfully. Water is a huge problem, and you all know it. I'm a geophysicist. We put out a seismic array in the Anadarko Basin in 2012 when induced seismicity was a big issue there. And we put the first proprietary array in the Permian Basin. And we've watched this phenomenon for many, many years. We actually made a decision 3 years ago. Actually, it was more than 3 years ago. It's probably now 5 years ago, maybe 6. We saw these deep earthquakes, and we thought they were associated with Delaware Basin injection, and we pivoted and started drilling Delaware Mountain injection and injecting more shallow. But that's causing problems of its own. There's places where you've got surface swelling. You've had some abandoned wells turn into geysers. And then we're also seeing some encroachment of water into reservoirs below it. So water is a huge problem, and it's going to just get worse before it gets better. And there are some inventive solutions. We're involved in a consortium of 3 or 4 companies looking at evaporative solutions, looking at different ways to clean the water up and discharge it for agricultural use. There's out-of-basin pipelines being contemplated and perhaps built. So there are solutions, and every little bit helps, but it is a big problem. It's an existential problem for the Permian Basin, and it really needs a solution, and it needs to come fast.
I was at the Permian Basin Water Conference a few months ago, and my favorite idea was the lakeside property created by treating the water and discharging it on the surface. So that'll be fun real estate if it occurs. There has been a lot of consolidation in the Permian. Is it over? What would create more, or what would keep it from happening?
Well, if we'd sat here a year ago, I would have said the FTC, but I don't think that's the case now. As if our cost, we'll see what happens with inflation. One of the things when we're talking about the price of oil and how people respond, our costs are the unknown. And although the steel tariffs in isolation, I don't think had a gating impact on our activity, certainly with these new tariffs wherever they go and the knockoff effects of the supply chain, I think there could be some inflation in our sector. But you know, I can't see the future any better than anybody else. And you know, I think that the price will be what the price needs to be, and activity will be where activity needs to be. So I'm not sure I'm the best prognosticator.
Okay. That's a very diplomatic non-answer to the consolidation question.
Well, no, the thing is, it's about price, because consolidation will happen if we need consolidation to get a lower cost structure. And so, you know, it ties into the price.
And that just qualitatively is, you were a smaller company, now you're a bigger company. Do you feel like becoming a bigger company did help lower the cost structure?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and certainly with the compliance things, having a bigger balance sheet just helps in everything. You can afford your mistakes. You can be bolder on things. You can afford tests. Just, you know, we're in a business that's very capital intensive, and having a bigger balance sheet is really, really helpful.
We talked about data centers a little bit. Power was a discussion in the prior panel. So when you think about power, is that you called water existential, you called gas really a really big deal. Is power existential or a really big deal, or power is just one of the 25 things you deal with every day?
Yeah, you know, electrification we could have a day-long session on electrification. I was
Settle in, guys.
Yeah.
The day just started.
Yeah. You know, look, it's very difficult to get power. And so we like so many others, have been on a multi-year path to electrify. We own and operate a lot of midstream assets, and that includes compression. And one of the ways that we've reduced our emissions footprint is to pivot to electric compression. But when the price of gas is as low or negative, the spark spread is such that it doesn't make sense to electrify. And so, you know, and then power is going up. And then behind the meter solutions seem a little silly, because you're going to put a behind the meter natural gas generator in place so you can change your compressors from gas to electric. And what did you accomplish in that? You're just swapping one gas source for another. So, you know, I think that if we can't get more centralized electricity out of the grid into the basin, you're probably going to see a lot of this electrification either take a pause or stop, because it just stops making sense with the spark spread.
The gas dynamic is so compelling. Yeah. So one of the things that I did 2 years ago at the first fossil fuel that I really like, and I'm going to do it again here. We're going to finish, Tom, and thank you for your insightful comments. We're going to finish with a lightning round. So the rule here is one word or very short answer. So you don't get to expound on this, and hopefully it'll help people feel like they understand where you're coming from. So with that, we will launch with WTI oil will finish 2025 over or under $55 a barrel?
Over.
The DoubleTree or the Midland Plaza Hotel?
Anything but the DoubleTree.
Okay. Permian or Appalachia? You're in both.
Permian.
There was only one answer for that.
I know the room I'm in.
Yes. The S&P 500 finishes 2025 higher or lower from today?
Higher.
Luigi's Italian or Cancun Grill?
Luigi's.
Waha gas will average $2 an MCF for a calendar year between now and 2030. Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Midland Basin or Delaware Basin?
Oh, please. Delaware Basin.
Key question here. The Godfather or Shawshank Redemption?
The Godfather.
Me too. The over-under on 5 data centers being built in the Permian by 2030.
I'll take the over on that.
Okay. Odessa Permian or Midland Lee Legacy?
Oh, pass.
Fair enough. Oil sees $80 in the next 3 years.
Absolutely.
That is a great way to finish. Please join me in thanking Tom Jorden.